Great. We can't wait to hear what you're going to share with us, and I know that it's going to be super inspiring. It really is fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Paul, I just want to honor you and thank you for the privilege of being able to share my testimony on this beautiful platform. I know how much it means to you and it means to me. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm just going to play a quick intro video before I get into it. Thank you. My ancestors were part of the French Huguenots, who, due to religious persecution, fled France and settled in the Cape between 1688 and 1691. A total of 178 families on 4 ships. In 1913, our great-grandfather trekked from Daar in the Northern Cape to a little place called West Nicholson in southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. And that's where my life started, from humble beginnings as a 4th-generation Zimbabwean in a cattle ranching background. I'm going to start off sharing a little bit of my life before prison, then the hardships I endured while I was in there, mixed in with a few life lessons, then the main life lessons I learned, and how the Lord had his hand on my life all the way through, and I didn't even know it. I'll be about 50 minutes, 55 minutes. I'll do my best to keep it short. But let me highlight the contrast of my life before I got sent to prison. I was living the good life. I worked hard, played hard, and I was an avid sportsman, playing several rugby tests for Zimbabwe too. I lived what you might call a very successful life with numerous thriving businesses. I was so busy being successful though, that after 14 years, my marriage fell apart. And I no longer lived under the same roof as my beloved children. I missed them terribly. But through making the right business decisions, by the year 2000, life couldn't have been better for this farm boy who grew up dirt poor. I was extremely happy, making plenty of money in my safari business. I was flying my own aeroplane, had a fishing resort on the shores of beautiful Lake Kariba in Zimbabwe, flashy cars, speedboats, houseboats, you name it. And to top it off, I was engaged to a beautiful woman. Then in an instant, my world was turned upside down. It all started one weekend in December 2000 when I went on a fishing trip with friends to my fishing resort on Lake Kariba. Late one afternoon, one of my mates and I decided to go tiger fishing on the lake, leaving the other guys bream fishing in the river. And on our way back, we spotted 2 fish poachers in a steel boat, who immediately upon seeing us, started paddling hastily for the shore in an effort to get away from us. Knowing they were notorious poachers, I drove my boat towards them to scare them off, and the wake of my boat tilted their boat, causing them to jump out into the water, which was about 1.5 meters deep. They're about 3 meters from the shore. They soon scrambled to dry land, and my friend and I then watched as they ran away into the bush and thought nothing more of it. The following day, the police arrived with one of the poachers and accused us of drowning the other one. To cut a long story short, I was framed by the poacher, the police, and the courts in an ugly, politically influenced conspiracy and sentenced to 15 years in Zimbabwe's prisons, of which 5 removed as remission. Unbelievably, my co-accused only got a $10 fine and was set free because he was not driving the boat. And that's exactly as it was stated in the judgment. On the 3rd of April 2003, during the height of the land invasion chaos in Zimbabwe, against police evidence, without a body, and on presumptions, I was convicted of drowning that poacher. The shock was inexpressible. I was innocent. I was a successful, self-made businessman with a high standing in the community. You can only imagine what was going through my mind when I read out that verdict. But what I didn't know then was from that moment on, my life would never be the same again. For the first 8 years, only one set of clothing was allowed at any one time. A standard white short-sleeved shirt and a pair of drawstring white shorts. Underwear was forbidden. After 6 months, you got a change of clothing. Sometimes. Other times after 9 months, leaving us walking around in tatters. I shared a cell 13 meters long by 3 meters wide with 78 other inmates. Each person had 33 centimeters, 13 inches, marked out on the walls in chalk. That was your space. The toilet was a stainless steel bowl sunk into an open 1 meter square cement block in one corner, as you can see in my sketch there. We were packed like sardines on our sides, with legs all crossing over in the middle. And we all faced the same direction. When you turned over, it was all together. As cushioning against the cold concrete floor, you'd fold 2 of your paper-thin, worn-out, lice-ridden blankets several times to fit your space, then cover yourself with a 3rd one. And your clothes wrapped around your toothbrush and toothpaste, or they'd get stolen, and that was your pillow. From sleeping on those freezing hard floors, my hips had bruised black rings for years, and shoulders still give trouble today. Can you imagine the discomfort? Those floors are cold and hard. And not even the breath you take is your own. You're packed so close together that what someone else exhales, you inhale. The back of somebody's head is there and you can feel breathing on the back of your neck. Can anything be further removed from freedom than that? And yet physical freedom is one thing. You can deal with it. We all can. By living in the moment to survive. But freedom of the mind and soul, that is something else. That is true freedom. They had imprisoned my body, but I refused to let them imprison my mind. I slept beside serial killers, hardcore armed robbers, ruthless rapists, and innocent good men. During those lonely long years, I'd watch the pigeons day after day. After they'd eaten the pieces of pup off the exercise yard floor, they'd fly over those high razor-wire topped walls, and I wished a million times that I could somehow just fly away with them and be free again. And I don't believe there's a prisoner that doesn't think that, because it is the only glimpse of freedom you get to see in there. It's just cold walls, bars, and razor wire. No furniture whatsoever. No beds, no tables, no chairs, no cupboards, nothing. Not even a mirror. Didn't see my face for the first 8 years. It's just rows of faulty folded blankets and hundreds of well-used water bottles on bare concrete floors. During my first 8 years, the worst thing to deal with were the lice. Thousands of them that never went away, ever. They would crawl and bite day and night, leaving itchy, weeping blisters. And because they never stopped, they were training, both mentally and physically. And there's nothing you can do about it. We had no basins or taps in the cells, and only one set of clothing was allowed at any one time. So we had to wash our clothes in the cell toilets at night wearing a blanket, then hang them on the walls with smuggled book staples to dry by the next morning. 3 or 4 of us would get together and take turns to wash our clothes because one garment had to be used to block the toilet to allow the toilet bowl to fill up when attempting to flush. No toilets flushed in any prison. The water only ever dribbled in slowly. Then we'd wash the clothes on the cement blocks surrounding the toilet bowl to bring them in and out as we washed, as you can see in my sketch there. That is Chikurubi Maximum Security Prison in Harare, and the red circle indicates my hall for 4.5 years in the prime of my life. I've moved to Chikurubi after exactly 1 year in Kami Max in Bulawayo. In 2005, during the Zimbabwe dollar crash, Harare city ran out of water. For 3 years, while in Chikurubi Maximum Security Prison, each prisoner was allocated only 1 plastic cup of water a day. 1 cup of dirty orange city runoff water from a nearby dam, carried by farm prisoners. That was to drink, clean your teeth, wash your face, bath, everything for 3 years. That's when guys really started dying. That's us sitting in formation, waiting for 1 cup a day. I learned that the most important things in life cannot be bought. Health, loved ones, and friends. In that order. Of course, God is number 1, talking about physical stuff. During my first 6 years in prison, I watched over 2,200 guys die, primarily from malnutrition. It was during the Zimbabwe dollar crash when there was no food outside of prison, never mind in there. After being moved to a medium security prison during the cholera outbreak of 2008 and 2009, in 8 months, out of 1,200 of us prisoners at Harare Central Prison, 432 guys died. More than 1/3 of us in 8 months. One weekend, 22 guys died. And that triggered something inside me about my health. And I want to challenge every one of you here today to do a rain check on your health. Because once your health is gone, everything else in your life will have no meaning whatsoever. Loved ones. Proverbs 17:17. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. In my case, it was my darling sister. In June 2006, the prisoner death rate was so high from malnutrition and disease that prison headquarters started allowing relatives to deliver food to their loved ones daily. And my darling sisters, Bev and Lynn, fed me for 3 months, selling furniture and scraping money from wherever, until Lynn sold her clay pot business and gave up her career just to feed me for 4 more years. That takes a very special person. And I can honestly say that without her, I wouldn't be standing up here today. I'm truly blessed to have her in my life. Unfortunately, very few relatives could financially afford to feed their loved ones daily. And I helped as many guys as I could afford to, but the hunger continued for most. But friends, family, love and support sustained me as much as the warm home-cooked food they brought. And friends, Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. There is a special unwritten code that bonds friends like we all share in this part of the world. The warm, caring, and considerate society we make up from all walks of life can never be equaled anywhere. I shared treasured memories with thousands of good men in Africa. And it was those memories and their endless generosity, consideration, and knowing what a fantastic bunch of people we still have left here that kept me going all those years in hell. Knowing that one day I'd be traveling around reminding people, including you here today, never to forget the value of your friends. Because only when you have them all taken away do you realize how much they mean to you. After Red Cross had taken over feeding in March 2009, and things got back to normal in there, we began a soccer league. And I was delighted to make the prison squad, giving me the privilege to walk under strict escort to play against the officer side on a field in their compound. I was the goalkeeper. And during our jovial march there, singing all the way with fellow players, I asked one of the officers if I might touch my first tree in 6.5 years. When granted permission, I joyously broke formation and did so. And I clearly remember the roughness of the bark, reminding me of my granddad's forearms, and the distinct smell of that jacaranda tree, which I knew so well. You have no idea how beautiful and uplifting it felt just to touch a tree and feel green grass again. My first evening at Connemara Open Prison, which is a farm prison where I was transferred after 8 years, I spent sitting around an open fire on old logs and bleached cattle skulls, chatting with old Ndebele inmates. Taking me back to I loved so dearly as a child. And I remember getting lost in their interesting stories and the beauty of the sunset, the dancing flames, tranquil call of a nightjar, and the bright stars and the moon, which I hadn't seen for 8 lonely, long years. I didn't see a sunrise or a sunset either for my first 8 years. Now, I appreciate the everyday little things in life, like a soft bed, a hot bath, tasty meal, or a spontaneous cuddle from a loved one, because those are the things you miss most when you have it all taken away. There are things we know that rejuvenate us. And for me, it's always been nature. I am, and will forever be, a farm boy from Zimbabwe at heart. Nature's in my blood. Touching a tree, smelling the earth, the feeling of soil in my hands. These things bring me restoration. And for you, it might be hanging out with friends, dancing, reading a good book, or swimming in the ocean. Whatever is good for you, do more of it. Despite the hell I'd gone through, physically and mentally, the worst part was knowing that my beloved children were growing up without me. I told you in the beginning that not living under the same roof as them when my wife and I separated was the hardest thing. Imagine the heartbreak I felt when I went to prison. We have always been extremely close. It is a bond I will cherish and protect to my dying day. My proud son, Dusty, only 18 at the time, was always full of ambition. And we'd joyously discuss and dream of making millions and plan endless projects and adventures. He was following in my footsteps and loving every minute of it, ready to take on the world with his dad, and then I was ripped away. my precious 16-year-old daughter Sandy and I had, and still have, an extraordinarily beautiful bond. Since a baby, she's always been my shadow. And especially as she to me, I'm to her. But at 16, I was her anchor. I was everything in her eyes. She confided in me without boundaries and clung to everything I said and did. I loved them beyond expression. They loved me. And the times they needed me most, I wasn't there. They went through first loves, crushes, dances, 21st birthdays, and entered the wide world, and I wasn't there to see it. It is an annoying feeling knowing that I'm their father and should have been there, but I couldn't be. And I don't want anyone here ever to have to feel that way. Make enough time for your loved ones. What I've shared with you so far is about 3% of my story. The rest you can find in my book, which will be for sale afterwards, $320. The forward was done by Ian McIntosh, the former Springbok rugby coach, followed my rugby all the way through. I want you all to go back 10 years in your life. So think about where you were in the middle of 2014. Now think about how much you've accomplished in the last 10 years. That's what a big chunk I had taken away. But even in the depth of such horrendous experiences, I knew I had ultimate control of how I chose to feel and respond. Behind every severity lies an opportunity. And that experience gave me the opportunity to get to know hidden attributes about myself and time to consider some really important things in life. My life in chains taught me many lessons, and that's what I'd like to share with you now. How my faith and mental strength got me through there. Romans 8:35, can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or persecuted, or hungry, or destitute, or in danger, or threatened with death? The Lord didn't say that we'd have no trials and tribulations. He said he would walk with us through those trials and tribulations. After being moved to a medium security prison while delivering food one day, my sister asked me if I'd like an iPod. So I said to her, what's an iPod? She said, it's a thing that plays music. So I said, well, how big is it? Is it true? So she indicated this small flat little thing. So I said, well, how many songs does it play? She said, about 1,000. I said, no way. Where do you put all the CDs? It's a fact. We laughed. Anyway, but the following day, the iPod arrived under the salad. And about a week later, one of those cheap Nokia cell phones was sneaked in too with a rechargeable battery. It was exciting, risky business that you couldn't dream of in a maximum security prison. This is in medium security. And everything was going perfectly until an envious prisoner reported me. After an unexpected search, unbelievably through some quick maneuvering with outside guards, nothing was discovered. But I was sent to solitary confinement anyway for 2 years. That was extremely lonely. But after experiencing that precious little link to the outside world, I had to get my phone back, and I did, which made a huge difference. I had officers charging my batteries for me and guys paying them outside, all in medium security, nothing in a max. You can't dream about that. And everything was going perfectly, and 18 months later, one of the friendly guards approached my file at 5 in the morning and whispered, Russ, they're coming for your phone. And there's no way of getting a phone out of there. But someone had brought me a protein powder about a month before, and it had to go through the security and a doctor, a big story to get it in. And when I opened it, broke that seal, tasted it, when I put that seal back and closed it, the next time I opened, that seal had stuck. So I kept it to hide my phone. So that morning, took it up, took the cap off, broke the seal, took half the powder out, wrapped the phone in plastic. I didn't have my iPod that morning. Put the powder back, put the seal. 6 o'clock, the guards arrive. What they do is they make you strip naked, then you jump with your legs open, like you're hiding something. Then you all walk out stark naked into the courtyard, 1,200 guys, and they do the search. So after the search, I go back in my cell and everything is upside down everywhere, but my protein powder still in good shape. 5 minutes later, I'm summoned to the security office. So I walk in there, there are 4 guards standing, one seated behind a desk, and an empty chair. I hadn't sat in a chair for 7.5 years. He says, take a seat. So I sat down. I knew something was going on, but it felt good. He said, do you have a girlfriend called Karen? So I said, no. I said, I had one before prison called Karen. He said, okay. When did you last talk to her? I said, long ago, before prison. He said, are you sure? I said, yeah. He handed me a letter addressed to me from Karen. So now I was talking to you on the phone the other night. You sound so positive. After some intense questioning, this thought just came to me. And I said, no, Karen is having lunch in Bulawayo. And she met a lady and I started chatting. And soon realized that they both had boyfriends in the same prison. So the lady said, well, let me call my boyfriend who's a guard in there. And he can call Russ and you guys can have a chat. So I used the guard's phone. But after I couldn't tell them what the guard's name was, they didn't buy it. An hour later, I'm escorted up to Officer in Charge's office. When you go up there, it's big trouble. And there were about 15 big brass officers all standing in a half circle, Officer in Charge behind his big desk and my empty chair in the middle. He said, take a seat. I sat down. He said, if you don't tell me what that guard's name is, your life in this prison is going to change. And him and I got on really well. And I said, officer, I don't know his name. And then the question started. How old was he? How tall? What rank? Where did you make the call? How long ago did you make the call? And I answered as best I could, and they were getting furious because they couldn't pin me. And then the head of the soccer, a very nice officer, he said, you want to talk to the officer in charge on your own? So I said, yes, please. So they all leave, close the door. I said, officer, we've both been through hell. We've watched hundreds of guys die. I've donated endless stuff to the prison service. I said, can't you just let this one go? He said, Russ, I don't care about you, but I want that God's name now. He was furious. So I said, well, officer, I don't know his name. He said, okay. Calls the officers, he's put him on death row in the dark cell. So they escorted me over to the condemned section. Used to hang guys in those days. And there were 56 cells, 52 had guys waiting to be hung. And of the 4 left over, the cells are 3 meters by 1 meter by 3 meters. And they've got a vent, there's no window. And one of those cells, that's exactly as my solitary confinement, identical cell. And the vent had a staircase built over it, so it was pitch black in there. It's called the dark cell, and they put guys in there to break them. So they made me strip naked, gave me 3 filthy, worn-out lice-ridden blankets, a 5-liter container cut off the top of the toilet, same as solitary, and a liter of water. They locked me in there for 23 hours and 45 minutes a day. So I was allowed out 5 minutes in the morning to clean my teeth, 5 minutes at 10 o'clock to have a shower, and 5 minutes at 3 o'clock to prepare for lockup. It was cold, lonely, and dark, like being buried alive. I couldn't even see my hand. And I remember just walking, holding the walls, doing some press-ups, doing some sit-ups, just to keep me sane. On day 6, I got on my knees and I prayed. And I'll never forget the feeling of like warm water being poured over me and a total sense of calmness. So I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. Within 30 minutes, I faintly heard my Afrikaans mate shouting from the soccer ground, hey, Russ, everything's okay, my mate, don't worry, everything's okay. So I jumped up, I said, hey, fool. He said, don't worry, Russ, everything's okay. So I said, okay. Lay down on the concrete, looking up at the darkness. Within 10 minutes, I unlocked my door. And the noise of that locks goes right through you. Chucked me my clothes, said the officer in charge wants to see you. So I got out into the blinding sun, across the courtyard, up the stairs to his office. His exact words were, he said, hello, Russ. I said, hello, officer. He said, have you remembered the guy's name yet? I said, no, officer. He said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it in God's hands. You can go back to your cell. And at the exact moment when I was praying, my sister was paying him $200 to get me out of there. And that was a huge turning point in my spiritual walk. I'm happy to say that Jesus is everything in my life today. I have learned not to let past thoughts hurt me. The past only exists in your head. It can only come to life if you let it. Jesus said in Matthew 6:27, can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? I was forced to live in the moment in prison, and it's one of the biggest lessons I still practice today. And to be able to find, that's a picture of me in 2010 in Harare Central Prison, 18 months after the cholera outbreak. It was a sad, lonely time in my life, but all part of God's plan. To be able to find positives in all the negatives going on around me brought hope, which is a huge part of getting through prison life. Hope is the anchor of your soul. It's what kept me sane and grounded in there. Hope enabled me to see that there's light despite all the darkness. Let your hopes, not your troubles, shape your future. I'll say it again. Let your hopes, not your troubles, shape your future. And never look for hope outside of yourself. To find it, you need to look within. We're made in the image of God. We have the answers. If you'd said to me in year 1, you're going home in year 3, I would have said never. I'm going home now. Like 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, I could live with. Anything beyond that was too painful. I counseled myself on how to think through the physical impact my thoughts had on me. And the thought of, like my mates on fishing trips or on trips to Vegas, we went every year for marketing, it hurt too much. So I'd block those out until that peace returned. And to be able to find happiness in even the smallest things that happened in prison kept me healthy. Those who couldn't died. Life in prison or in Las Vegas is still just life. It's what you make of it, no matter where you are. I had everything I could ever wish for, and in moments, it was all gone. Why you should forgive. James 1, 19 and 20, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to be angry, for a man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. Many of us carry anger and resentment because of unforgiveness. The humiliation of being labeled a murderer in terrible conditions were extremely hard to deal with, as was the pain of my bitterness, anger, hatred, frustration, and revenge for what they'd done and were doing to me. I hated them bitterly. And initially, would lie there for hours, wishing every terrible thing on each of them in turn, the poacher, the police, the judge, the ministry, and all who were involved in my conviction. Then one day, I was struck by the realization that they'd all forgotten about me long ago. Here I was, consumed by the unfairness of it all, and they, blissfully unaware of the evil lodged in them every day. In the end, I was only hurting myself. I was carrying all that in my head and beating myself up for nothing. The single biggest lesson I learned in prison was true forgiveness. And for me, it is bigger than anything I could have achieved on my own. True forgiveness was inspired by God Almighty, and so letting go. It was a huge weight off my shoulders. And I learned to live in the moment from then on. The past was too painful, and the future full of unkept promises. So I just dealt with each day as it was. I learned to have faith, because no amount of worrying was going to change what I was going through. If you have anger or resentment towards anyone in any way, it will eventually destroy you, because that is what those emotions do. They steal from you. They steal happiness and freedom. Jesus said in Matthew 6:14, "For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you." And many people ask me how I managed to forgive them for what they did to me. Now I remember walking that exercise yard after about a year, and I was tired of all the anger, hatred, and bitterness. It was draining me daily. And I remember looking up, and I just said, "Lord, take care of them, and let me get through this road that's been put in front of me. What goes around comes around. They'll get what they deserve. Their judgment day will come. And once I'd handed that over, my life in prison changed. And it wasn't a gradual process. It was an instant mindset shift. I felt it. I just felt this relief, like I had this secret that I was carrying for years and years and so scared it was going to get out. And then I just told the Oaks, gone. Forgiveness doesn't change the person that hurt you. Forgiveness changes you. You can look at it in two ways. You can forgive, forget, and move forward, or you can retain, remember, and regret. The choice is yours. And if you say, I'll forgive, but I'll never forget, then you still remember and will never move forward. And I'm not talking forget about the lesson learned. Just don't revisit the incident. You can't bounce back from anything unless you forgive those who you believe have done you wrong. And only when you forgive and let go of the past can you be fully free to move forward with your full potential. Why you should be grateful and the big picture. Jesus said in Matthew 16:26, and what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but you lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? What shall a man give in return for his soul? We all want too much in our lives, concentrating on what we haven't got instead of being grateful for what we have. And for me, giving thanks to God every day goes a long way. For my health, beautiful family, lovely wife, beautiful home, soft bed, running water, and so on. When there's no food and no water, and people are dying all around you, you become grateful for the fact that you're still breathing. And another day is a blessing. When you lie in a cell with 70 other people, and your breath is not even your own, gratitude suddenly has a different meaning altogether. Accepting that what I went through cannot be changed, and being grateful for what it taught me has unlocked my vision for my future. The healthiest of all human emotions is gratitude. Remember that and practice it. Having an attitude of gratitude is one of the most impactful habits for a fulfilling and healthy life. I learned to see the big picture of life in prison. I was sent to a cruel boarding school, 6 years old, 200 k's away from home. We're only allowed to see our folks once every term. We have 3-month terms and 3 terms a year, and that was at half term. Even if your folks came to town, you weren't allowed to see them, but you upset the child. So I never had good memories of my junior school. The year I left, 1 week before I left, I lost my dad, turned our lives upside down, and then enjoyed the wild ways of the Rhodesian Bush War on cattle ranches throughout my teens. It was a wild, rough era. And being crazy about rugby and water polo and the war environment created a wild, hardy character. Hardships were part of everyday life. And I'm telling you this because I believe that resilience is something that is learned. You're not born with resilience, you're born with fortitude. And I believe that my hardships and hard times growing up stood me in good ground for what I had to go through. But my uncle and I left the ranch house at early one summer's morning to go and dip cattle about 20 k's away on a ranch called Bundu Hills in the middle of nowhere, and deserted from the war like all the ranches were back then. And the ranches were huge. They were 25,000 acres each, and they were part of the Metopus mountain range with these huge solid granite mountains. And about 1 k from the dip crawl, a troop of baboons ran across the road in front of the vehicle. There were thousands of them there, and they were considered vermin. I jumped out the vehicle, my rifle, no hat, no shoes, no shirt, just like that. I took off after them, shouted to my uncle that I'd see him at the dip crawl. About 2 hours later, I was completely lost and in a full spin. And there were just these mountains everywhere with this thick vegetation. And by 6:30 that evening, 12 hours later, I was exhausted, very sunburned, starving. I hadn't eaten all day. Thirsty as anything, I managed to find a muddy puddle with a dead giraffe. Tasted like hell. And in absolute desperation, I once again climbed up one of those many mountains looking for Mount Taula, which I knew and that could work out where I was. And there were just mountains and more mountains. And I remember the desperate fear and feeling of hopelessness. I mean, I was just a teenager, middle of the war. There was no one, I was all alone. There wasn't a settlement or anyone living within a 20K radius, and it was getting dark. The last thing this hardcore wild rugby player would ever have considered back then was to pray. I was okay. I didn't need help. I knew those that need help go to church and pray. But I got on my knees, first time in my life, and prayed to God for help. I was 18 years old. And I'll never forget the feeling of like warm water being poured over me. And I had no idea what it was. So when it happened on death row, I knew exactly what was going on. And this feeling of calmness. And I stood up, turned around, just like being guided. I just walked down that mountainside, same way I'd come up. Where the solid granite goes into the soil was long grass. And I just carried on walking, just like a zombie. I just walked. 10 meters further were 2-car tire tracks. My uncle had shot a kudu bull there during the rains the year before. And I want to tell you the chances of that are like 1 in a trillion. It's not developed country. This is cattle country back in 79. There was nothing there. There wasn't a road or a fence line anywhere near there. And I still didn't know, didn't appreciate it. When I look back on it now, how the Lord has been trying to reach me from then. And I followed those until they faded, then saw they cut the trees to get the vehicle in through the mountains. Finally, as it was getting dark, got to the road where all spread out looking for me. You know, I never told anyone what happened on that mountain that day. I thought they'd laugh at me and think I was crazy or weak. That's how it was in those days. Sitting in the courtroom before I was sentenced, I prayed hard up through the window into the clouds. Nothing happened. During my first year in prison, I prayed hundreds of times to go home and nothing changed. I wondered where God was time and time again. And then when I forgave them, I felt that spiritual feeling. And so I knew it was there, but the conditions after that, I mean, there were people dying every day. There was no food, no water. My fiancée left me. I promised I was going on for years, story after story. So I stopped praying altogether. It hadn't changed anything. After 7.5 years, I had that incredible incident on death row. I still didn't go home for 2.5 years, but I knew there was a bigger picture. I knew that there were bigger things. You know, it was hard to make sense of it, but I knew there was something about this whole thing. It was too surreal. You know, before prison, I was a big fish in little Bulawayo going nowhere, like a hamster on a wheel going round and round. And it was all about me, money, my empire, more and more. And now I'm a little fish in a whole wide world making a huge difference, and it's not about me. It's about helping other people and making a difference in other people's lives. And now I have a purpose in my life. I never had a purpose before. And the satisfaction I get from helping others far outweighs the millions I was making before. And the lesson here is no matter what hardships you're going through in life, just remember you're being prepared for where you're going. God has a plan for each and every one of us. I wish I could express the happy, bubbly, exciting, beautiful feeling I felt as I walked out those prison gates to freedom after 10 years of hell. People don't appreciate freedom. And I've realized that even when we're not in prison, there are ways in which we're in prison ourselves. So our business partnerships, badly selected careers, being obsessed with money and ambition in the corporate world, even unhappy marriages. And it's only when you have your freedom completely taken away do you realize in many ways that you're actually in prison too. And when I look back on it all, it makes me wish I could somehow get through to people how precious and priceless freedom is. If you look at your life as it is, how free are you within your circumstances? Freedom is not just not being in prison. Freedom is the ability to make a choice and act on it. Freedom is letting go of what you can't control. Freedom is forgiveness. Freedom is being free from negativity. Freedom brings health. If you can be free in all areas of your life, then you'll reach your full potential. I want to take you back quickly to the year 2000, the year of the incident. In that picture on the top left, is my client, Ray Anthony. He's a billionaire from Pittsburgh. We're flying in his private jet from Fort Lauderdale to Tampa, Florida, where we collected General Norman Schwarzkopf, the gentleman on the right of that photo next to me. He was the officer commanding of the United States Armed Forces during the Gulf War, the most powerful man in the world at the time. We were going to Reno to the Safari Club International Convention together. It was a huge honor. The top right-hand picture, I'm with Louis Bacon and Glenn Dubin, two billionaires from New York that I spent many wonderful times on safari with. Bottom left, I'm in my Ferrari in Miami for a month. Bottom right, in a private yacht in Fort Lauderdale. My life back then was all about flashy cars, private yachts, and mixing with billionaires. I thought I was invincible, flying high, thinking I was bulletproof. Unbeknown to me, I was being controlled by ego, power, and money. Satan had sunk his claws deep into my soul, and I didn't even know it. I was as far away from God as I could get. Make sure you're not in that lost world too, because the only place you'll find freedom is with Jesus. Not another houseboat, flashy car, or another million. Going back to my young days, I was a wild teenager, but no mistake. Drinking, fighting, poaching, anything that pushed the boundaries of law was fun. It was a wild era during the war, never considering consequences. But had I known during all those years what I know now, life would have been very different. You don't want to know what else I went through in prison. I had to fight for my life on many occasions. And it was by the grace of God that I came out alive. Thousands didn't. With all due respect, be very careful what path you choose to follow in this world today. Don't get mixed up with the wrong people and start pushing the boundaries of the law, because you don't want to go where I've been. There's no mercy in prison, none. It's real and it's rough. After I left prison, I had nothing. All my companies went broke. Started working for guys that used to work for me in the safari business, borrowing vehicles to make ends meet. And I had lost my desire, my trust in the Lord. I just thought, how can I come out having gone through all of that for something, for some reason, and what good is there that could have come of it? So I wasn't an atheist by any means, but I just didn't understand. I didn't pray. I didn't come from a praying family. And then on the second year in safaris, I was on a safari, and one of the clients from here, a very big CEO from here, heard that I'd made a talk at some farmers' meetings, about 120 sit-down farmers, and he wanted to see a copy of my speech. So I showed him, and he said, "I've got a new life for you, my friend, and I'm going to help you." And he flew me to Cape Town, got a PowerPoint together, and I started talking all around South Africa. Hoedspruit, Nelspruit, PE, all over. Joburg, Cape Town, flying everywhere, just talking to groups of Zimbabweans, that all my mates gathering people. And then I met my wife, who was a great Christian. So then I started thinking, now I can bring the Lord back, I can try and get what I felt in prison. And she'd been a great Christian. She was very close to Ray McCauley. She worked for Rhema Church. She ran all the women's conferences. And she was very close to Pastor Ray. And then we ended up living with Pastor Ray McCauley and his wife in their cottage on their property for 6 months. So I got to know Pastor Ray very, very well. And I'd have to watch TV in his room every night. And I went to every Sunday to his church, heard all his sermons. I met some of the big generals, Rick Godwin, Creflo Dollar, Tommy Bonnet, and then lots of them. And then Art Boshoff, Bert Pretorius, I got to know those guys well. But I just had built this wall around me from my upbringing that I wouldn't let anyone in. I had this fear of rejection, fear There's trust issues, fear of failure. And I just wouldn't submit. And Pastor Ray prayed over me, and I gave my life to him in April 2018. But after I'd said the sinner's prayer, I opened my eyes and nothing had changed. So I thought, well, I didn't understand. And I went along with it. I carried on listening to these guys and going back. And on the right there, I launched my book on Rhema Church, 2,500 people. And it was fantastic. But I didn't feel God. I didn't feel that I'd achieved anything, that I could trust and just let go and submit. And then that lasted. The year after that, we went to Israel. I'll quickly run through this. I'm running out of time, but it's important. This was a big turning point in my spiritual life. Not emotionally, just the history of how it all worked, because I always wanted to know how things work. I tried to read the Bible, and it must be King James or something, because it didn't make any sense to me. So when I went to Israel, it was a free trip, and it was amazing to just see, that was the Feast of Tabernacles, and the only person I really followed every day was Angus Buchan. And it was just that thought for the day, and I just, for years and years, every day I'd get that thing. And he was preaching at the Feast of Tabernacles that year. And I heard him preach, and his message was how important it was to read the Bible. And it was very powerful. And then he made 4,500 of us walk up to the stage and vow that we're going to read the Bible from cover to cover. So I made a vow. So I got home, I said to my wife, I'm going to do it. I want to do this thing. I want to find out more. So I bought an NIV, not a King James, and I started clapping that. And I just loved it. I mean, this is manly stuff. This is killing people and bloody. I thought, yeah, this is proper. I didn't know about all this stuff, and I just devoured it. I've read the Bible about three and a half times now, and more revelations coming, and the more I grew. But I was battling, financially. So the years went by. Let me just quickly finish this, because I was also baptized in the River Jordan, where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. And I just still didn't come up, and everything was different. I just thought, when is it going to happen? It's floating in the Dead Sea. That was incredible. You can't go down. You stood up like that, and you're just up to there. It's just unbelievable. But it's very acidic. That's where Jesus carried the cross down that road. That was emotional for me, and I just pictured him carrying the cross down the road. That was the tomb, the garden tomb in the Garden of Gethsemane. Looking at those olive trees, I just wished I could talk to them, just looking at them and just thinking the history that they had. That's in the tomb on the left there, where they laid Jesus to rest, and where he rose from the dead. And when I went in there, I could just feel. My hair all stood up, and there's bars there, and I just put the phone through. But when I came out of there, I just thought, no, there's something here, for sure. And my wife coming out of the tomb there. That's where Capernaum, where Jesus started his ministry, the Sea of Galilee. My wife in her element there. And then I carried on talking, to a lot of churches, men's conferences, a lot of big corporates all over the world. And I had the chance to reach people where others couldn't. But I still was battling financially. And I thought, if the Lord wants me to do this, then you've got to provide something for me. And then I had a weekend in George, this town, with that man there. And it was, I can't explain it. I was prophesied over. The weekend was incredible. I left here. I said, no, I'm going to live in George. I was done. I love George. And I went home, and I was up at 5 every morning, praying in tongues and reading my Bible, and I was going. I was full on fire, talking about Jesus to everyone I could find. And a small lesson I want to just tell people. One day my wife's sons came, because we've only been married 5 years. After prison, I never knew her before that. I've known her for 8 years. But her two sons came to the house and they said, we're not going to come and visit you guys anymore if you keep talking about Jesus. And that hit me. And it changed my whole spiritual walk. I stopped getting up in the morning to pray. I just thought, no, if I'm going to lose my kids, then, And I just want to warn people, don't give the devil those little things to ruin to backslide, because that's the devil's work. They follow. And another important thing, I'm running out of time, I know, but important thing is that that I try to preach I'm mixed with a lot of big sportsmen and everything in the circles that I mix. And a lot of them are atheists. They don't want to hear the word Jesus. They get upset with you. And they say, hey, if you can talk that Jesus stuff, then... And then I just carried on being me. And now, 2 years later, they're starting to see the light. Now they're stopping drinking. And they're starting to, hey, the Bible story, can you tell me? But not in front of the mates, just on the side. This lesson here is don't try and always tell people. Show them. Show them. Be the light. Yeah, this is talking all over. So I just wanted to say, the most important thing is I still, after I gave my life to the Lord and getting up in the morning, because I got back into it, and I had a church that I was following online, and just, I thought I loved the teaching. I was loving learning more about the Bible, and that's when I was devouring the Bible. Like I said, I've read it 3 times. But the finances were tight. I couldn't do anything. And then I planted myself in a church, because the guy who was preaching that day, he said, and your blessings will be blocked unless you planted in a church, physically. So I said, okay, April this year, I moved to a church. The moment I planted in that church, everything erupted. In May, I spoke to 9,600 people, 3 roadshows. These are some of them, thousands of people, all over. It was unbelievable. From being plugged in to the church. When you start serving and you plugged into a church and you tithe and you sow, I promise you, I'm a living witness. That's what happens. Everything changes. I've spoken a lot. On that same trip, one of the people led me to Angus Buchan. Said to me, do you want to meet Angus Buchan? I'm on his media team. I said, do I want to meet him? I'd love to meet him. I'm now a spiritual son of Angus Buchan. We talk on the phone all the time. It's just, everything has changed from just being obedient and submitting. I don't have any stress. I've given everything to God my whole life. And thank you so much. I've been going too long now. I'm not nearly finished.